Well, today marks the 60th anniversary of the day Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were handed down a conviction for conspiracy to commit espionage for stealing atomic bomb secrets from the United States. This was a ruling that would later lead to their execution. We're talking about a time largely ruled by hysteria, anti-communism sentiment, and fear of new developments in the making of the atomic bomb. The Rosenbergs case continues to be taught in history classes around the country as a significant and important event, and also continues to be debated to this day, and even, yes, on this program. Right here to discuss is Brian Becker, National Coordinator for the Answer Coalition, and Seton Motley, President of Less Government. So, Seton, I'm going to start with you. The case of the Rosenbergs, we've learned about it since we were young here in schools in America. Was this justice served or a stain on America's history? As
demonstrated by the Venona transcripts, and then later in '91 when when the Soviet Union fell, the KGB records were released. They was guilty and they got what they deserved.
Execution for sharing secrets.
Yes.
You're laughing over here, Brian. What do you think?
Well, I'll get my grammar.
Well, the conviction of the Rosenbergs and then their execution was, of course, we should remember, the first time civilians had been executed in the United States for the act of espionage. It was conspiracy to commit espionage. It was, in fact, the beginning of the McCarthy witch hunt hearings. Thousands of people had to leave the United States. Tens of thousands lost their job. Many people who were communists or socialists went to prison simply for believing in socialism or communism. And it was a hysteria. And, of course, it was a complete legal lynching in all ways. Ethel Rosenberg, as we know now from the record that we have seen, was really held hostage. They were hoping that her husband would name names. And she was put to death really as a pawn in this bigger hysteria. So this was a legal lynching.
Seton, as Brian said, this was sort of a product of the time. Do you think that people today, Americans who had the intention perhaps of sharing secrets, that they should be executed today?
Yes. Depending upon what the secrets are. For instance, what the Rosenbergs shared about the Manhattan Project was certainly grounds for execution. You can laugh all you want, but you know, we had kids hiding under their desks for 30 years.
A byproduct of hysteria. That's right.
Well,
that's
yeah,
right.
yeah, but
another
there'd be a lot less hysteria if the
hysteria.
Soviets didn't have the bomb. They would not be. They were not climbing under their desks to hide from an American bomb.
Well, actually, only the Americans ever dropped an atomic bomb. Let's not forget that. I mean, until the Soviets had nuclear parity, when the U.S. had a monopoly on nuclear weapons, they in fact used nuclear weapons against civilian cities. I mean, after the Soviets acquired the nuclear weapons, which of course was a great disappointment to the Pentagon. In fact, no nuclear weapons have been used.
And a great disappointment to freedom-loving people. 50,000 people died, or 500,000 people died in North Korea and Korea and Vietnam as a result of the parity
that's what Judge Kaufman said when he sentenced the Rosenbergs to death. He said, you're responsible for all the deaths in Korea because if the Soviets didn't have a nuclear weapon, then North Korea definitely would not have been in a conflict with South Korea, as if that was the reason there was a conflict in Korea. That's ridiculous.
No,
all right, hold on, fellas. Seton, I want to turn this back to you. You said, even today, that if somebody committed the same crime or was charged with committing the same crime, that they should be executed today. Let me turn the tables and ask you about this. What about Americans working for the CIA, working in other countries, trying to find out important secrets or information to protect this country? If they're discovered by leaders of other countries, they'll be killed without
benefit of a trial.
But should they be? Should
and a lot
they
of people
be
died as a result of what the Rosenbergs gave. So, you know,
I'm not asking if they will or won't. I mean, should they be executed in your mind? Americans doing what they think is right to protect this country, working in dangerous situations.
But you executed by us?
No, by the other countries.
Well, that's going to happen, and they're not going to get a trial.
In other words, first of all, the Rosenbergs did not give the nuclear secret to the Soviet Union. At each and every step of the way, the United States said every major advance in Soviet technology had to be gleaned from certain spies. The Rosenbergs, to the extent if Julius Rosenberg was involved at all, was low level. The Soviets developed the nuclear weapon. All states, as you mentioned, engage in statecraft. They have informants. The Americans have thousands of informants. The Soviets obviously did too. The point of the matter is, the Rosenbergs were executed as part of an anti-communist hysteria. Harry Truman at that time, at the time of their arrest 60 years ago, he was the least popular president during an unpopular war, the Korean War, up until George W. Bush. Suddenly there was a diversion. The whole blame could be shifted to the communists. That's the nature, the politics of diversion, the benefit of hysteria.
I don't know if it was any communist hysteria so much it was an anti-espionage hysteria. And they committed espionage. They gave away nuclear secrets. They gave away other secrets that led to the death of American agents. And they deserved to go, and they went.
All right, speaking of giving away secrets, in some ways you could call the Rosenbergs, at least for what they're convicted of, sort of the previous days whistleblowers. Certainly, we talk a lot about whistleblowers today with the case of WikiLeaks. We talk about Bradley Manning, who is accused, not charged, but accused of leaking classified documents to WikiLeaks. He has been treated in many ways, you could say, tortured, kept in solitary confinement. Who knows what else is going on there? There have been some things coming out in the way he's been treated. Brian, do you think this is a fair connection to say that in some ways Bradley Manning is the modern-day Rosenberg?
Well, in the sense that he's being scapegoated and demonized. I mean, there are important differences in the case. What Bradley Manning is accused of doing is releasing classified documents that the New York Times published and that other mainstream media in Europe published. But what's important is that the military is treating him as if he could be, and the charges are being prepared so that he could be sentenced to life in prison or executed for releasing these documents that the New York Times saw fit to print. And in that case, too, and you hear the Republicans and the conservatives in Congress and in the media saying, yes, Bradley Manning should be, if need be, executed, too, to send a message to other people, whistleblowers. So in that sense, I think there is a comparison, even though some of the fact patterns are different.
Seton, should Bradley Manning be executed for what he's done if he's convicted of doing what they say he did?
Yes, I've said that before. I'll say it again. But I don't think that it's an equal comparison.
Should Daniel Ellsberg have been executed?
The Rosenbergs weren't whistleblowers. They didn't give it to the New York Times. They gave it to the Soviet Union. They're not whistleblowers. They're spies. What Manning has been charged with giving away is, I think, of such a nature, destructive to our foreign policy, destructive to our national interests, that if he did all of what he's been accused of doing, not charged yet, as you point out, I do think he deserves to be executed, yes.
He's being tried in the media just as the Rosenbergs were tried in the media. He's been held incommunicado. Charges have not yet been pressed, and yet he's stripped naked every night. I mean, he's being held in a way that would be humiliating and considered a form of torture. Why? Because they're trying to do what? Yes, when you keep people.
So people who sleep in the nude voluntarily, is that torture?
When you humiliate people, when you degrade people, it's a form of psychological psych ops, terror. And just as Ethel Rosenberg, who they knew was in no way involved in any of this espionage to the extent that it existed, the way she was held in a particular way, threatened with death, hoping that she would abandon her husband or start to name names so that the hysteria could grow. That's the nature of a hysteria.
Many people say that's something that it seems that they're trying to do with Bradley Manning in terms of breaking him and giving access to Julian Assange. But Brian, I want to go back to this point. We did earlier interview the son of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, and I presented a theory that's pretty common, and he says he can buy at least part of it, and that is the theory that the Rosenbergs were disloyal to their country, but they were loyal to their class. They were loyal to the workers. So, you know, if this is the case, being loyal to their class instead of their country, let's take what's going on with the unions, people who say that they are most loyal to workers' rights. Does that mean that they should then, you know, be loyal to the Communist Party?
Well, I think it's perfectly legal in the United States to be loyal to the Communist Party or the Party for Socialism Liberation or other socialist parties. There's nothing wrong with that. And communists and socialists understood that the Soviet Union, in its conflict with the United States and then in NATO in the late 1940s, was not acting as an aggressor, was not preparing nuclear weapons in order to drop them in other countries, was in fact operating from a defensive posture. The Soviets lost 27 million, and they were the ones who principally defeated fascism. Then the Chinese had a revolution in '49, and the Korean Revolution, the Vietnamese Revolution. So working people around the world were in a state of uprising against colonial oppression and class oppression, and there were sympathizers and activists and socialists and communists in the United States, and of course they were loyal to that revolutionary process.
Seton, you were shaking your head on a few different aspects. What did you want to touch upon specifically?
First of all, the Soviets in a defensive posture in the late 40s and early 50s is a patently false, absurd joke. Second of all, they were the ones that were fostering the communist revolutions, not workers. Communist revolutions in Korea,
a
In
plot
Korea,
from
Vietnam.
Moscow.
Yes.
Yeah. You can't.
KGB.
That was a very powerful leadership then. If you could make all the people in Vietnam rise up, in Korea, in
just the
China,
Viet
all
Cong
those
and the
people were taking their orders from Stalin. Really?
And yes. And beyond
Really?
that, and if Rosenbergs were loyal to their class, they should have rescinded their American citizenship and returned to the country or go to a country that was more in line with their thinking.
Well, what about
not
saying
sell out the country in which they were citizens
The question,
and lived.
the question is what class should be in charge in the country? Should it just be the billionaires?
We don't have
Should it just
classes
be the
around the
bankers?
nation, well, around
Should
the
it
world.
just
We
be
have
the
nations.
corporations? So if
We have countries.
If working people seek justice, then they're somehow traitors. When in fact,
No, if they give
kind of
espionage and national nuclear secrets to the company, then they're traitors.
All right, unfortunately, we are out of time. Certainly could talk about this for a lot longer. Seton Motley, president of Less Government, and Brian Becker,
Thank you.
The national coordinator for the Answer Coalition.